normally say leave them out there. But, boy, a 3-run seventh inning, that really hurt the Twins last night, and they lose 5-2. Now, this afternoon, looks like a beautiful day. It'll be 7:40 The Fan, 2 o'clock's the pregame show, Game 3 of that 3-game series, and the Twins will try to win it. They've already run this will be the last time they face Oakland this year, too. So
that's weird.
Yeah, isn't it?
The fact that they're on the West Coast, though, I like it when you say the last time because I don't like West Coast trips. But
they got Seattle in a couple weeks, though, unfortunately,
right.
too. So,
But you know, I mean, you and I have talked about this many times, and like you've said, is just win series.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're going to lose some ball games, but win the series.
You know who really etched that into my head more than anyone? You know, Tom Kelly would mention it in his classic Sunday morning show at 9:30 that used to be here on KFGO because that was an epic show. But who really got it through to me was Doug Simonik. You know, he says the biggest thing, because he would always try to mention that to the general a lot too, you know, everyone wants to win every game, but you can't. You're just trying to win a little bit a series, and that's what you're trying to do. So today's a big game, and Sonny Gray is pitching for the Twins.
Yeah.
So,
and that's a good sign. When we started, Derek, the one thing that you made perfectly clear was this team's going to go as far as what its starting pitching and bullpen let it go. So far, I'd have to give them an A, not an A-. An A. It's
been a big surprise. There's no getting around it. And, you know, Dylan Bundy looked good. He came back from the COVID IL, and he pitched 3 innings. Maybe he could have gone a little bit longer. But, yeah, so far so good as far as that is concerned. And you sit there, and if you're a Twins fan, my heavens, I mean, to sit there and still on top of the division right now, that is not a bad thing. The FM Redhawks were in action last night for and Jack Michaels with the call on 740 The Fan. It was a back-and-forth affair, but the Redhawks did strike first. Jack Michaels on the Redhawks Radio Network and 740 The Fan. They're back in action tonight, Game 2 of that 3-game series, but they did lose 6-4. And, you know, speaking of 3-run innings, that was in the 6th for the Kansas City Monarchs. So 6:40 is the pregame show on The Fan right after Twins baseball. So they got a busy day today coming up. You know, the Kansas City Monarchs are good, but the FM Redhawks are really good. It's just one of those things where, you know, lose late in a game like that. This Pete Maris that they have, the second baseman who's had 3 hits again last night, I'm hoping that he comes back on the bus. Now, for him, I hope that maybe he can get hooked up, but unbelievable. You got a second baseman who's hitting like that. I don't know if he's long for this league, unfortunately, for Redhawks fans.
He's not, but you know what? That makes the league better.
Yep, it does.
It makes the league better. It makes the Redhawks better. It makes, you know, so yeah, you might lose him. I get it, but, you know, it'll make more people want to play for the Redhawks. So
there's no question. It's just good for the American Association.
Yeah.
You know, Doug and I were talking last hour during the KFGO Morning Coup with Doug and Dan that you're in a situation where, remember when the NFL draft was like 12 rounds? Now it's down to 7, but all those free agents, and I think some of the, UND and NDSU and South Dakota State, these teams, many of these players have signed on, and it's worked out well for them. And that's kind of what the American Association is like right now, where they're like the free agents. You don't get drafted. You're not in the affiliated minor leagues, but you're in a minor leagues where all 30 teams can look at you and want to sign you, and then you get affiliated, and next thing you know, you might be in the majors before you know it.
So Abby's dialing, but I've got a spot quiz for her. You ready?
Yes.
One of us two over here has an old Kansas City T-bone hat.
Yeah.
Guess which one?
It's you. I've seen.
That's right. Yeah. It is by far one of the ugliest hats I've ever owned. Derek.
I don't doubt that.
But I love it. I just love it.
And the reason that's an easy thing for her, because you don't see me wear a baseball cap. I used to when I had a receding hairline, but since I shaved my head, no, because in the summertime I'll look like a bobber if I'm wearing.
When you said that on the honor flight, some of the veterans were like, "Don't you get hot? You want a hat?" And he goes, "I'll look like a bobber someday."
Yeah, exactly. My whole top of my head's white, and then my face is red. That's not a good look for anyone, not just me. So no, and they always. And how many times you see me cake myself with sunscreen? Always, right? Yeah. I mean, it's a greasy thing. And then at 49 years old, I understand I'm clogging my pores, but I should not be totally bald and still get zits. It's not fair. I mean, that's not. How can you? I mean, that is.
I don't remember seeing you with a zit.
Oh yeah, because you put so much sunscreen in, so it clogs your pores, and it starts, and then you get zits. I mean, I'm almost 50, and I'm bald, and I get zits. That's not fair at all. I mean,
I put on a ton of sunscreen. I don't think I get a lot of zits, but
I guess I need to
maybe
clean
my
my
skin's
pores
so
more.
leathery that just
Maybe you need a new sunscreen.
No,
Okay.
It doesn't matter. I use
I
a
want
lot
to
of
know
different
from
ones.
you two whether or not this was insulting. Okay, so last Coffee with KFGO, which, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned, but we're going to be in Hillsborough tomorrow.
Yes.
At the Goose River Brewing, so hopefully you stop by. But at the last Coffee with KFGO, there was an individual that was there who used to work in the North Dakota Agricultural Department.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't say her name, but her first name is like a big airplane, okay?
Okay.
That's fast. Okay, so anyway, she's waiting at the Coffee with KFGO. My show gets done. She walks up and it's like, "Hi, Jed, how you been?" She goes, "You're looking more like Willie Nelson every day."
Oh my heavens! Well, I mean, you think about it, he's in his 90s, and
Right.
you know,
I said, well, the other option kind of stinks. I mean,
yeah, right.
Not wrinkling a little bit, but I didn't really take offense to it until about an hour later.
Well, he's a redhead, so are you, right?
Yeah,
so I mean,
right.
so that's what's you got going on. I mean,
Right.
He has way better hair.
Well. Yeah, I mean,
She can be cold
does he
that
still
way.
do the braids? He must, right?
We talked
I
about,
don't think he could get rid of him.
Abby said I couldn't grow a ponytail if I wanted to. And that's not true.
I mean, are they real braids, or is it like the fake Brett Michaels hair
That's what
from
I've been
Poison?
wondering.
You know?
Willie doesn't fake anything.
I wouldn't think so.
No. Willie Nelson doesn't fake anything. It's either there or it isn't.
It's amazing for guys like him too, because he still like has like that red hair to this day, and I don't think he colors it. And you've seen this
Got
before.
a splash of gray in it.
You could, it does, but I mean,
Isn't it
he's
pretty
in his 90s. I mean, that's amazing to me, right?
That's
It's pretty gray, isn't it?
It's because he plays dominoes and smokes a lot of pot.
You ever seen like a person who's like in their 90s and you can tell they still have their natural hair color and it's not gray?
Yeah.
It's amazing to me. That is unreal.
Sunday on TV, the Wayne's World guy,
Mike Myers.
Mike Myers was on. He was getting interviewed on CBS, right? He had the worst hair dye. I mean, it's so
dark.
It's like, okay, Mike, there is no hair color like that.
Yes.
I mean, you can fake it all you want, but there is no hair.
Yeah.
It's like Dr. Oz. This is your hair.
I always like the people who like have a white beard and then they color their hair black. I mean, that's who are you fooling here? I mean, seriously.
It's like it doesn't work that way.
No.
It just does. All right, stick around. We have more riveting hair follicle discussion coming your way right after this.
You know, it's a good sign when the NBA lottery happened last night. The Magic won it, and the Timberwolves weren't involved for the first time that I can remember. In a very long time, right? So you're just like, oh yeah, well they weren't involved last year either because of the D'Angelo Russell trade. But I didn't even think about it at all because the Wolves aren't in it.
Right.
So and usually they made the playoffs. They aren't in the NBA lottery. Who would have thunk? I mean,
I know.
That's weird.
And that is weird because how can we complain about never drawing the number one pick?
If you're not in it.
If you're not in it.
Yeah, so
which has been a tradition of us.
I guess this is
fans.
progress, the fact that they actually were not in the NBA lottery and they didn't lose a pick to the Golden State either last year. So,
right.
Yeah.
So Celtics going to win this thing even though they got clipped last night?
I don't know. The Heat are playing well. Former Timberwolves Jimmy Butler, man, when he's focused, he is focused. He really played well last night.
Yeah. Jim Shaw came in yesterday. He's all Celtic.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like over the top.
He's probably hurting today.
When we come back, let's talk about the school board in Fargo. We got a candidate for you right after this. We're going to get through all of them, but we're trying to get them. We're trying to get as many people we can in that are candidates for the Fargo City Commission, Fargo School Board. Devin Stachinsky is in studio. How'd I do?
That was good.
Look at her. She's like, you're going to nail this last name.
That was good. Yeah.
He's in studio right now, and he is running for the Fargo School Board. Devin, good to have you on News and Views.
Thank you for having me.
Why? Why are you running?
Mainly
I love the look on people's face when I say why. You put your name on a ballot. Why'd you do that?
for my daughter, mostly.
Okay.
She's in third grade. She's got some special needs issues, and she has to do, speech and fine motor every day. And I want to make sure that she's getting the best possible outcomes across the board as she goes through school. And the best way for me to help her is to help the school itself improve. We've had a lot of situations in the past several years where there's not been parental input, and that's been detrimental to some of the special needs kids, my daughter specifically. So I feel it is time that we actually have a situation where we start getting parental involvement in education.
Okay. So do you have examples where that hasn't happened in the past, that you feel the school board hasn't done their job?
One of the things that I hear a lot from parents, especially down south, is when they made the boundary changes for all the schools. I have parents who have talked to me and they're like, I can see this elementary school across the street from me, but my kid's got to get bused, a couple miles to a different school. And they're like, why can't my kid go just across the street to the school that they're right next to? So boundary lines would be another one where the school board isn't really listening to what is desired from parents. And I know parents don't always have all of the information to make the appropriate decision. But when a parent says, why can't my kid just walk across the street to go to school? I mean, why can't they?
Okay. I guess what I was asking, Devin, was, you mentioned your daughter being special needs, and what I was saying or asking, and probably didn't ask it as well as what I should have, but can you cite examples where the Fargo public school system hasn't met the needs of your daughter, and specifically where the school board has ignored that?
Well, like I said, she has to have speech every day.
Uh-huh.
And when they made the masks mandatory, her speech was on a nice steady trajectory, and then they put the mask on and she just plateaued and made no improvements. And we did the best we could trying to help her at home, but we don't, at home you don't have the same type of resources as an actual speech therapist in the school. But then they took the mask off and she continued, then she turned it around and went straight back on that continued trajectory.
Did the speech therapist in school advocate on her behalf to say she shouldn't have to wear a mask then?
That I'm not sure.
Okay. Because to me, that would be one of the big tests, right? It would be,
Yep.
Okay, did the professionals in the school system advocate on behalf of my daughter if, in fact, what you said is true? I mean, that's the person that I would go to. Devin, what you mentioned geography in terms of the school district. I have had a number of people talk to me about that. I think it's a real issue, but you and I both know that you don't have enough elementary schools, and certainly maybe not in the right places. You mentioned down far south, it's growing like a weed. Mm-hmm. How do you meet that demand? Because the school district now is saying no new buildings until 2027. That's going to be a long time between 2022 and 2027.
Well, the thing we have to really pay attention to is we're not able to get the staffing we need for our current buildings, period. Like, bleeding teachers like crazy. And that's...
Why do you think that is?
Not a conducive work environment. I get teachers that say that they have kids who will have a violent outburst and stuff. And like a month ago, like a kid threw a chair across the room and ended up hitting my daughter. And I'm just like, why is there so much violence in the classroom? So you have all of these compounding issues, and it just makes the teachers not want to stay because it's not a conducive environment. And that gets back to societal issues where we don't have, it was a lot different when you and I were kids versus now.
That's always a phrase people throw out, though. There's a lot different when you and I were kids. I mean, I'm assuming that if your daughter or any one of your children, and your daughter might be your only child, but I'm assuming that if your child came home and got in trouble in school, that you, Devin, would discipline her at home. You would back up the school. Fair?
Yes, absolutely.
It's no different then. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely no different than what Ray and Doreen Heitkamp would have done. I didn't tell them when I got in trouble in school because I didn't want more trouble at home because it would have happened. But I think that still goes on now. My grandson isn't an angel, and my daughter and son-in-law have had to, have been told he isn't always being an angel. Well, he comes home. My point is I struggle with how people think culturally everything has changed. One or two parent can make it seem like all parents are bad parents when it comes to their kids.
Right. But we can also attribute some of this to social media and the advancement of technology, in where a lot of the children, they get their instant gratification, basically on demand. So there's the amount of patience has waned in the children. Mm-hmm. So then they have an outburst because they're not getting what they want or need right now.
Okay. And you would direct that back to parenting and
in schools as far as...
But how would the schools be responsible for a child on their social media not getting instant gratification?
Because of the use of tablet computing in the schools.
So they shouldn't have that.
I'm not saying that entirely. I'm saying use of it should be limited, because I know with my daughter, the second someone hands her a tablet, she doesn't want to do the work that's on the tablet. She wants to go look for other stuff. And, when it's at home, it's like, no, you're going to do exactly what you're supposed to be doing, none of this other stuff. But, I mean, when you've got a teacher in an overfull classroom, it's an issue to police all those kids individually. If you were teaching out of the book on the chalkboard, all eyes are on you. It's a...
No, I understand what you're getting at. To me, it's a catch-22 because it's such a useful tool for teaching. And it's like teachers are constantly being put in as a hall monitor. I get that. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but that's the job in 2022 versus what the job was when you and I were young. When you and I were young, you got a textbook and you turn to chapter 8. Now you pull up on your tablet in many cases.
Well, and I'm not saying that technology outright is an outright problem, because we have an opportunity coming up that could be an absolute boon for the kids, because the school district has said that for their Power School unit, when you go to the fargo.k12.nd.us, that's all based on the Power School thing. Well, they're changing that to Blackboard. Well, the university system uses Blackboard. So what we could have is a situation where the teacher puts all the curricula on Blackboard for a quarter, and then you could have, say your kid would be really proficient in some subject. Like my daughter, she knows all the planets and all that. Mm-hmm. So when they did that unit, she was bored in the classroom. She would be able to work ahead because all material would be available. Same with, she struggles in math, so she'd be able to go back and revisit that, and that would be a good way to mesh the home and classroom component.
Yeah. We had, and this, I don't want to go backwards, I want to go forwards. If you were elected, would you push to have Rupak Gandhi removed? Do you think he's a good school superintendent?
I think what we need to have is metrics in all of the contracts for administration, because there's nothing in the current set of rules, and I have them right here, that say the district needs to be making this percent of reading proficiency, this percent of math proficiency, this percent of
So putting goals out there.
Yeah, of graduation rates. Because, I mean, you pull COVID out and you still have a downward slope trajectory of the last 10 years. So, I mean, at least, something needs to be put in there so that we have.
So your answer
markers.
is you don't think he's a good school superintendent?
I didn't say that.
Well, that's the question, though. Do you think he's a good school superintendent? Because to me, if I'm voting in the Fargo public school system, I will grade people on whether or not they think there needs to be a turnover in the leadership at the school level, which is him. And so to me, when I vote, I'm going to want to know that.
Well, his contract is up in 2 years because it's a 2-year cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that if things don't turn around, I would not renew his contract.
Okay, that's a good, fair, honest answer. Let me ask you this. Were you part of the movement to recall?
I was not.
Okay. Did you sign the petition to recall?
A friend explained to me what was going on, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll sign that."
Okay.
But I didn't go out looking for signatures. Like, I didn't canvass for them. I didn't do any of that stuff.
Do you think individuals that submitted those petitions that were falsely done, they weren't right, they got thrown out, do you think those individuals should qualify to be on the school board?
I don't think they should be disqualified because clearly they identified that there was a problem that required such an action to attempt to recall. And if we have people who are able to identify current issues in the school system, why would you deny them the chance to get in and fix it?
Okay. And again, these are just questions.
Right.
For me personally, when I look at a recall petition and I see someone that sends in a petition with people who signed it who aren't from the school district or from the city, that to me tells me they're not doing their homework. Fair?
That is fair.
Okay. If people want to know more about you, if they want to get, they heard you now and you connected with a lot of people, I have absolutely no doubt. Where do they go, Devin? What's you got a Facebook page? You got a website?
I have a Facebook page, Devin Stuchinski for Fargo School Board. I have a different side project that a website that I own, so I'm using it to host a video if I make one. That's just ndhp.info. But otherwise, you can email me, devinstuchinski@gmail.com, if you have questions about my platform or position on certain situations happening in the school district. I've been speaking at every single school board meeting since March, with the exception of one because I was on vacation, and I plan to continue to do so as a member of the public. So if you want to see some of my concerns, you could watch the first 5 minutes of any of the school board meetings of the last 2 months.
Okay.
And
all right, Devin, thanks for coming in. I appreciate it.
yeah, this was fun.
Yeah. When we come back, what are we going to do? Well, at some point, we're going to get a chance to visit with Robert Costa about the elections that took place yesterday. Ballots are being formed, and there were primary elections. Robert's an expert when it comes to all of it. Also, check out his book, Peril. He wrote with Bob Woodward. So stick around. More coming your way. from people that don't feel it's a disqualifier to have circulated the petition for the Fargo School Board, the recalls. I want to be perfectly clear about this from my position, and that is that they should have the right to recall. You should be able to go around and find the signatures and do what you can to make your school board better if that's what you believe you should do. I get it. I completely respect that. But if you send forward petitions with names like they did, I don't want you on the school board telling my kids how to do their homework because you didn't do yours. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's where I'm at. Check out Mike McFeely's latest article, a darn good article. All right, we'll be back with Robert Costa right after this. This is a real treat for me. I've watched his work from afar. I really have. I'm a big fan of his whenever he pops on TV. Obviously, right in front of me right now, I have the book Peril, which if you don't have it, get it. Bob Woodward and Robert Costa were the force behind making sure that information gets into your hands. Robert Costa is a political reporter. He's someone who has worked for a number of people, CBS News, NBC News. He's worked for the Washington Post. He's been on Washington Week on PBS. I mean, I can keep going down the list, but the fact of the matter is people want to hear what he has to say, and so do I. Let's bring him in. Robert, good to have you on News and Views.
Oh, great to be with you. Thank you.
I want to talk about what happened yesterday in terms of, the elections that took place that decide who's on the ballots in the fall. Madison Cawthorn. I mean, we can go through a whole list of them. Some aren't settled yet. I realize the Senate race in Pennsylvania isn't settled yet. But overall, when you look at that process of what happened yesterday, do you believe it was a good day for endorsements for Donald Trump or a bad day for endorsements for Donald Trump?
It's not a black or white question. It's a question that is complicated with a complicated answer. Because what we're looking at right now, based on these results, not only on Tuesday, but in recent weeks, is a Republican Party that is still very much in the image of former President Trump when it comes to the ideological thrust of the Republican Party. It is not reverting back to George W. Bush or even Ronald Reagan type political positions. It's still very much a Trump party on trade, on foreign policy, on the economy, on cultural issues, on even its personality in terms of its combativeness with Democrats and how it frames political debates. What's up for debate is whether Trump's political cues, his endorsements, are being followed by his own supporters. And it's evident talking to voters a few weeks ago in Ohio. I was there in the past week in Pennsylvania, my home state, that so many Trump supporters in places like the industrial Midwest very much like and trust President Trump, but it doesn't mean they take his advice on every single thing when it comes to politics. They still may support him in 2024, but they might not support Dr. Oz, for example, in Pennsylvania because they see him as an outsider. And that's such an intriguing political dynamic where even if Trump is defeated in a primary race, his candidate is defeated, it doesn't necessarily mean he's losing steam politically.
And that's the reason that I asked the question the way I did, was because it's one thing to win in a primary race, and it's another thing to have found that right candidate in the fall. And, you just said something that has been on my radar, which is Dr. Oz has been, somebody asked whether or not the traffic was backed up on the Jersey Turnpike. There's that joke going around Pennsylvania and in political ads because he's an outsider. And so if you're the Democratic Party and you're sitting there in a year where it's an off election year and you're the party in power, which isn't a good recipe, and you're sitting there looking at the fall and the poll numbers that go along with the fall, was yesterday a good day for the Democratic Party?
It's still a very difficult year for the Democratic Party. If inflation remains where it is, of course, that could change. If people still feel a lot of economic pain, midterms are always, as you know, tough for the incumbent party. The Democrats control power in Washington. They control the White House. And if things are going wrong in people's lives, they have grievances about their situation, they will usually blame the people who have power at the moment. And at this time, it's, of course, the Democrats. That being said, the Democrats have some possibilities here that could keep them in power, not only in Washington, but in the state. But Pennsylvania last night is an example of this. State Senator, a Republican, Doug Mastriano, won the gubernatorial nomination. And he is someone who was in Washington on January 6, 2021, organizing as an election denier, does not believe President Biden is the legitimate president. He won the Republican gubernatorial nomination last night in Pennsylvania, and he never even engaged with the press. In fact, over the weekend, CBS News and other outlets were not allowed into Mastriano events. But is Mastriano going to be able to win a general election? He has about $1 million, less than that, in his campaign war chest. But he's going to be running against now Attorney General Josh Shapiro, a popular statewide Democratic official in Pennsylvania, who is now the gubernatorial nominee for the Democrats. He has about $15 million in his war chest. And in a state like Pennsylvania, it's not just about having events. It's so much TV, the big state. And Shapiro is going to be in a very strong position, his allies believe, running against someone like Mastriano. So even in a tough year for the Democrats across the board, and they might lose the House of Representatives and they might lose the Senate, they could pick up some seats here and there in gubernatorial and Senate races.
So you mentioned Pennsylvania as your home state. To me, it's like the ultimate example of what's happening in politics in America. That swing state that could go either way, and that state that has proven that they vote very independently when it comes to the candidate. And yet the Republicans seem to come in with these high-profile, very, one-issue orientated, this is what it is, and it's more anti than pro. How does that play in a state like Pennsylvania? How does, in the fall now, Robert, I'm not talking about, in the primary, because we've seen how that plays out. But if you're going to run in the fall in a state like Pennsylvania where you are still arguing about, the 2020 election, how does that play?
It might not play in places like where I grew up, the so-called collar counties around Philadelphia, the Philadelphia suburbs, Bucks County, Montgomery County, these sorts of areas. What's intriguing to me as a reporter is that Pennsylvania voters seem to recognize this environment, everything you just outlined. And what I mean by that is when it comes to the Senate Republican primary, they know that President Trump wanted Dr. Oz to be the Senate nominee. He gave Oz his endorsement. There was also an outsider named Kathy Barnett who got a lot of attention, one of these conservative firebrands. And running in third place in the polls in recent weeks has been David McCormick, a traditional Republican businessman, was a hedge fund manager, is very wealthy, is married to a former Trump administration official, Dina Powell, and he became almost an also-ran in the final days of this campaign because he didn't have a lot of pizzazz. David McCormick is kind of just a normal business guy, and he's an Army veteran. Didn't have a lot of snap, crackle, and pop, but he could win this race. Suddenly last night, it was clear that McCormick was right there in the hunt with Dr. Oz. And the question is why? Why did McCormick suddenly rise? Well, talking to voters, this is a state, Pennsylvania, that has elected someone who supports abortion rights as a Republican governor, Tom Ridge. It's elected someone who's become a more moderate or conservative voice in the Senate, in Pat Toomey. So sometimes voters make their own calculations for the general election, who could win. And you see that last night in Pennsylvania, that some of the Republicans are going, I don't care what Trump says, we need to win this seat. We need to win a swing purple state like Pennsylvania in the general.
And that's still out there. I mean, that's still yet to be determined, which to me shows you exactly how close it is. Robert Costa is our guest. The name itself should probably, get your attention and say, all right, Joel, I know who the heck he is. Ask him the questions. Let me ask you this, because you're speaking to the center of this country right now. You're speaking to 4 states, basically. And in those states, there is no Democratic Party anymore, other than Minnesota, where you're visiting with right now as well. When we look at these races, I'm a Democrat in a very Republican state. I have to ask you, when you're around your fellow commentators and people that evaluate where America's at with its politics, has the Democratic Party left that central position so that people in the center part of this country can even get elected? Because that's what's going to play in these purple states like Pennsylvania as well. It's going to matter. You need to be liberal to get the job, but yet when you get elected in a state like Pennsylvania, you don't need to be ultra liberal. You don't want to be. And so I'm curious what your take on that is.
It's a great and important question. To answer that question, I would suggest everyone closely follows Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman in Pennsylvania in his Senate campaign, because he's the opposite of where the Democratic Party in some ways has been going. He doesn't have the the so-called look of a typical politician. He's not someone you would expect to show up at Davos or the World Economic Forum. He walks around Pennsylvania, 6'8", tattoos, was a working class town's mayor. He is married to a woman named Giselle Fetterman, who was raised partly as an undocumented immigrant. He is someone who supported Bernie Sanders in 2016 during that presidential campaign. But what is so notable about Fetterman is he's someone who has been going to Trump voters in Pennsylvania, even during his primary race, and saying, I'm one of you, in terms of understanding their concerns about the loss of manufacturing. And the question for the Democrats now in this country, especially in places like the upper Midwest, like the industrial Midwest, which includes Pennsylvania, is can they win back the voters who Trump effectively stole from the Democratic coalition in 2016 and partly in 2020? That working class voter who may have a manufacturing past in their own career, in their family, who has seen those jobs disappear, at times go abroad, China, or other countries. And there's a frustration there. And in that frustration, they're looking for answers. They're looking for policies that resonate with them and their lives. And Trump spoke to them in 2016 in many respects, even if they were traditionally moderate Republicans or even Democratic voters. And that's why Trump changed the political landscape in this country. A state like Pennsylvania had not gone for a Republican presidential candidate since 1988. Then Trump won it in 2016. We saw across the upper Midwest, Trump did better than expected with a lot of those types of voters. Democrats in 2020 made the bet that Joe Biden, with his roots in Scranton, Pennsylvania, could be someone who also spoke to those voters, and Biden was able to win the election. But the Democratic Party, in the prism of its critics especially, is still often cast as the party now of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and other progressives who are in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. But Fetterman is someone who says, I want a $15 minimum wage, I want progressive policies, but I look like a guy who's not socializing at the Georgetown cocktail parties. So it's a progressive policy agenda coupled with a different kind of persona that could appeal to Trump voters. We'll have to see if it works in Pennsylvania and whether, if it does work there, if it can be repeated elsewhere.
Well, John Fetterman looks like one of the guys I ride down to Sturgis with. He looks like the guy that could be right next to me on his Harley when I'm on mine, and I like it. I like it. There's no polish here. There's no, he says it. There doesn't seem to be this filter of, boy, you better be afraid if you say this, you're going to disqualify yourself in the Democratic Party. And I think that Democrats, Robert, will easily embrace someone like that, and Republicans as well, if they just think they're honest. And that's the bad part to me of being a Democrat in the Midwest is I began my first minute in any conversation defending I'm a Democrat by people mentioning AOC or Bernie Sanders. That's what it's like here in the Midwest. And so the Fettermans of the world, they might have progressive policies, but if they're out there putting a face forward that has that blue-collar look, blue-collar feel, I'm pro-union, Democrats can win with that in the Midwest. They really can. So when you say that's a race to watch, for me, that's really a race to watch.
It really is, because the Democrats for years were the party that was more nationalistic, on trade, on foreign policy, and that has now become the Republican Party. And the Democrats, if they're defined as a party of kind of anti-nationalism, then they face a threat from a Republican Party that day in, day out is casting itself in Trump's image as America first.
Well, we're sitting here in a wet cycle like you wouldn't believe. Guys are struggling to get crops out in the field. The protections that are in place for them in a tough time like this were put in place by Democratic United States senators and Democratic presidents. And yet we as Democrats have to the farmers are like, I'm not voting for you. And it's mostly because of social issues or social beliefs. So you are right in highlighting that race. I know how busy you are. I know you're up against the wall with your time. Check out his book, Peril. He and Bob Woodward put together. Great read. Robert, thank you. Thank you for taking some time for us here in the Midwest.
Thanks so much. Hope to make it up there soon, and maybe we can do this next time in person.
I appreciate it. Robert Costa, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, get your thoughts on what you just heard him say. Robert Costa is, I mean, could you tell what political party he was from there? I mean, could you? The answer is no. He doesn't do what I do for a living. He doesn't have a talk show where, you say some things, get the phone lines going, that type of thing. He's a reporter that brings a lot of research background conversations, that in knowledge to, what he does. But the race that he talked about, this John Fetterman, I think it could still be Dr. Oz. It could be McCormick. Who knows? I think McCormick is a tougher race for the Democratic Party. If it's Dr. Oz, you basically have a carpetbagger that came into Pennsylvania that hasn't been from Pennsylvania for like ever and just wanted to be in the United States Senate. And if you're John Fetterman, you just grab McCormick's ads and say, there, I'll play these. I don't need to produce ads. So that being said, what you have is this great big mountain of a man that nobody's going to put on the cover of GQ in John Fetterman. I mean, this guy is my kind of guy. He's a guy that would sit right next to you and he'd buy when it's his turn to buy. And he'd hop on the scooter next to you and by God, you'd be riding on about a 3-day trip up on the North Shore. I mean, that's who John Fetterman is. That being said, he believes there should be a $15 minimum wage. And a rising tide rises all ships. I mean, he is that guy. And so there are policies there that conservatives would fight against, right? But he's got whatever it is. And Dr. Oz, in my opinion, is a fake. He's a fake. One day he's pro-choice, next day he's pro-life. One day he's anti-gun, the next day he's for-gun. And so it's going to come down to being one of those races where you're in a year when Democrats are going to get their butts handed to them. And yet you're in a year where you've got a John Fetterman running against a Doc Oz. And you're in a swing state. And so when Robert Costa, one of the more brilliant minds out there, doing what he does for a living, says keep an eye on that race, he's right. He is right. And that's one I know I'm going to, and I hope you do, because when you see the election results, if those are the first ones in, I'll know how a lot of other races are going to go. All right, so let me get this out there. You know, when I looked at the races yesterday, what I saw was a Republican Party that is still being very dominated by the 45th president of the United States. That you know, they can say, well, he endorsed this candidate or he endorsed that candidate, and people are sitting there saying, well, this one won and this one lost, so Donald Trump isn't as powerful. Forget that. Donald Trump is the Republican Party, and the reason he's the Republican Party is that the vast majority of people listening right now see him as the Republican Party and want him as the Republican Party. I'm not so naive that I don't. I was in Williston talking with some absolutely fabulous guys at the American Legion, and one of the individuals that was a great guy to visit with was not from my political side of the aisle. And he looked at me and he said, wouldn't you admit, Joel, that if he could have kept his mouth shut, that Donald Trump would have been one of the best presidents this nation's ever had? And I said, no, I don't believe that. He wanted to know why in a very polite way, but he believed that, and I'll bet you a whole bunch of other people in that room believed that they thought he did a good job as president. They just were embarrassed at times with how he acted, right? So the Republicans still want that government. They may not want the antics. They may not want the theater. They're going to get that, whether they like it or not, with Donald Trump. They're always going to get it as long as he's the head of their party. But the truth of the matter is they think that he governed well. They don't dive into, you know, the fact that the tariffs didn't help farmers. They don't dive into the fact that government debt exploded. They don't dive into the fact that deficits, you know, could hinder this country for a long time, and that now deficits are actually going down. They don't. That isn't what they want to talk about. That isn't. I think in large part the individuals that say they didn't like how he spoke or all the theater that he brought with it, I think they did. I do. I think they liked waking up every morning saying, what did he say on Twitter today? Or look at how he told that reporter off. Or look at what he said. You know, oh, man, he just says it. He doesn't care. There's no filter there. I think they liked it. I think they did. And I think that there are certain Democrats that need to learn that. And by learning that, I don't mean being rude. I don't mean being a jerk, which I think that Donald Trump has proven that he's more than anxious to be. What I believe is that Democrats need to find a way to just say it without worrying about who they tick off by telling the truth. Now, I hope that makes sense to you. You know, this sensitivity training that you feel like you have to go through to be a Democrat gets really, really old. Really old. This whole, man, if you made a joke about this, if you did that, you know, you risk your position in the party, that you can't do that. If you said this word, oh my goodness, that's who you are. It defines you for the rest of your life. If you believe that, oh man, then get out of here. You don't pass that litmus test. And that's what's killing the Democratic Party in the middle of this country. That's what's killing the Democratic Party in the middle of this country. And I go back to some of the individuals that aren't, in my opinion, the same type of Democrat that I am, to where I don't know that I would vote for them. I would not vote for Bernie Sanders, okay? I never did vote for Bernie Sanders. He's far too liberal for where I'm at, and I don't think he really understands situations that can be worked out that the government doesn't belong involved in, right? And let me explain what I'm getting at. With one issue, I think I can explain this all the best. You've got individuals like Bernie Sanders who are going to come out there and they're going to say, ban all ARs, right? Their assault weapons, ban them. Ban the assault weapons. And they're not going to know if you put certain guns in front of them what they are. They're not going to know that. They don't like guns. They don't want to be around guns. They don't get guns. They don't understand what the culture of guns and the fact that guns have been used in our society here in the Midwest for many years for many reasons. And none of them being racism, violence, murder. And yes, sometimes they are. And they're going to be, when all of us that are listening to this right now are dead and buried, guns will still be used to murder people. That doesn't justify what happened. That in no way, shape, or form doesn't mean we don't have a conversation about guns. But I go back to what defines a Midwest Democrat versus an East Coast or West Coast Democrat. And guns would be the perfect example. Now, let's go back to the hard right. What defines a far right individual when it comes to guns versus somebody like me when it comes to guns? I mean, I feel like every time I got to put this disclaimer out there that I own more guns than I probably should. You know, I collect some guns. I shoot some guns. I hunt with some guns. I have fun with some guns. I trap shoot. I use guns. I know how to load them. I know how to shoot them. And I know how to put them away safely. And I know where the safe is on them. Okay? So when you look at the right, there can be absolutely, positively no discussion on it. No discussion on gun laws whatsoever. Nothing. Get out of here. My Second Amendment, tough break. This is here over my cold, dead finger or hand or whatever their motto is, right? You've got the far left, who, in my opinion, are very much in the minority, who are defining this country in a way that it can't be defined. You've got the far right, who I think are in the minority, who define this country in a way that it's being defined, but I don't think it's accurate. What I'm trying to get at is in the middle. If you sat down with someone like me and you said, we need deeper background checks before we will sell you a gun. You cannot walk in here and leave here with a gun. We need to make sure that we do research on you in regards to what you might have done before you get a gun. I think that's a good thing. I think that 70, 80% of all Americans would support deeper background checks on individuals with guns. Now, that being said, you're still going to have that example of somebody that went around the laws and was able to get their hands on a gun and create what happened in Buffalo and everything else that went along with it. I get that. I understand that because there are guns out there. What never gets measured in the equation I just gave you was what it did stop, because you'll never know what it did stop. I compare it at times to what happened with COVID. You're never going to know the precautionary methods that were put in place in the beginning of COVID in regards to whether it saved lives or not, because the lives are saved. Nobody's going to say, well, okay, Abby Miller was saved because of that. You'll never know that. You'll never know that. And so people will argue about the science all they want. The truth of the matter is precautionary methods were taken, and it might have and probably did, and I would even go so far as to say it did save lives. Now, look at what's happening with guns. If you went about tougher background checks, if you did a better job of checking on individuals when they're putting out manifestos in social media and going to their house and saying, yes, here's the deal. I, as government, meaning law enforcement, do not belong at Joel Heitkamp's house worrying about his 870 Wingmaster that he's going to take pheasant hunting because he likes the old gun his dad bought him. I don't belong there. But I certainly do belong at a young man who turns 18 years old, who's apt to drive 200 miles to Buffalo to kill some people. And you know what? I know it because he told me. Now, if the government, in your eyes, drove up in his driveway, walked up, knocked on his door, and said, you wrote this, you put this out there, this is what you believe, I'm leaving here with your guns, would you be okay with that? Would you? A bunch of you are yelling, nope, because where does the government stop? What door don't they stop at? When you don't realize that 10 people would be alive just through the common sense of taking the guns away from a man who told you he's about to commit murder. Now, that fear that you have is a small price to pay for what would have happened to save those 11 lives. Now, will it happen? Will it get done? Not as long as we have the left saying everything's got to go away. We got to take the ARs. Everything's got to go away. And you've got the right saying never, 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 never. You're not touching them. Until we as a country do what the middle of this country, in my opinion, the common sense members of this country believe when it comes to reasonable gun laws, and I will pay the price of waiting 3 days. Pick a day, 3 days, 4 days until they get the check done on me to see if I should have a gun. I'll pay that price. I'll wait. Let me tell you a little secret. I had to go through driver training to get my license. I had to go to DOT and take a driver's test to get my license. I have to go in when it's renewed right now and make sure I can still see to be out there on the roadways and the byways so that I'm not killing people when I'm driving. Here's a thought. Maybe a little checking on the individual before they get the gun in their hands isn't a bad thing. And you can cite example after example of, oh my God, this person would have done it anyway. He would have got it from his Uncle Ted. There are things you're not going to stop. But there are things you'll never know you stopped. Let's get to the Weather Cave and visit with Too Tall Tom. Tom? 6, you call, you get through, we visit. That's the beauty of this show. Want to get a chance to head to the ranch, though, get a chance to visit with Sarah Heinrich. And, it isn't what anybody wants to talk about, Sarah, but the truth of the matter is more rain in the forecast. It's not what you want to hear.
More rain in the forecast, and I know a lot of producers are really trying to get something done. Rain came through yesterday, and now we've got a dry day today, but it's too wet to get into the field for a lot of people. And so, the push is on. The dates are continuing to pass by us here, and we're trying to string dry days together, and we just haven't had a chance to do it.
So here's my big concern. We all know that the clock is ticking, the calendar's sitting there, and pretty soon farmers are going to be put in a position where they're going to be saying, do I lie? Do I tell them that I got this crop in on May 31st? I mean, it's not tenable, Sarah. It's not the right way to do business.
Right, absolutely not. And the thing of it is that even if you get past that crop insurance date, it only declines by like 1% per day. So it's not like it's a significant difference. Do I think that most producers are going to try really, really hard to get that crop in? Absolutely, because we have commodity prices at historic highs. And so I think they're going to be working hard to get that crop in.
Exactly. That's perfect. I'm glad you put it that way. All right, so what's going on in the markets?
Right now we're seeing July corn down 17.5 at 7.83. Well, December's at 7.44, down 16 3/4. July soybeans down 6 cents at 16.72. New crop November comes in at 15.12, down 13.5 cents. Spring wheat market, defensive tone. We have July spring wheat down 53 cents at 13.40. September at 13.37, down 52.25. Cattle also in a downward trend with June live cattle down 98 cents. August feeder cattle down 68 cents at 166.10. And for June lean hogs, 75 cents lower at 104.40. Yep. With your markets, I'm Farm and Ranch Director Sarah Heinrich for the News and Views Radio Network with our Egg Studio sponsored by Enterprise Sales of LA City, your grain handling and storage expert.
Thank you, Sarah. I want to get to some of these text messages. Somebody said, Joel, if you have a concealed weapons permit, all your background checks have already been completed, so you don't have to wait to take your purchase. Again, no problem with me, because why? You've done your background check, right? I mean, common sense. Absolutely common sense. Another one, Joel, this shooting was a failure of a large amount of people. The school did its job. The hospital did its job. But somewhere the people who had the power to stop this didn't do their job. Background checks fail. In Hunter Biden's case, a drug user, and in the shooting, he would have been committed to a hospital. See, that's how you don't get things solved. Right there. Right there is how you don't get things solved, and why you're not part of any serious argument to stop it, because you used politics to divide any reasonable conversation about what would make good policy. You injected politics into that. What if I said, you know what, background checks will work because Donald Trump wants you to kill everybody and he could care less how many black people you shoot? What if I said that? Have I taken myself then out of any reasonable conversation on what we could do on background checks? So for you who sent this, just know when you shave in the mirror, if you're a man, that you're not going to be taken seriously by people. You're not. Back to the News and Views Radio Network. Where are we going tomorrow? Abba-dabba-doo. Where are we going?
We are going to Hillsboro.
And we're going to be going to the Goose River Brewing, and we're going to be hanging out there. Now, I had my hopes up, and I'm not sure. You know, the Goose River Brewing sounds a little like you, like Sarah Heinrichs, like Amy Eiler, a little Starbucky kind of a thing. What's this?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that you can get the good fancy coffees, as you say. Fufu? Is that what you say? Fufu drinks?
Yeah. Which, believe me, gets me in a lot of trouble with my buddies. But, yeah. I'm
sure you could.
Ask them to lift their pinky when they drink those. Well, I don't think it's a wrong thing.
The thing is, though, is that you also don't like coffee, and I've seen you drink some borderline fufu drinks.
Example.
The chocolatey chip, I think they call it a frappuccino, but it doesn't have coffee in it. It's from Caribou Coffee.
And I ordered that when?
Okay, well, you don't order them.
Exactly.
But people get them to you, and you enjoy them. Or when we were in D.C., and I got you, the formal name is a pink drink.
Yeah.
From Starbucks.
That's what I call it, right? Isn't that what it is?
Well, it is called that, and there's no coffee in it, but it's super good. And I remember when I gave it to you, I said, you're not going to want to hold it, but you're going to like it.
I didn't hold it for long because I drank it fast. All right, let's get back to the phone lines here, and we'll get to Andrew. Andrew, you're on News and Views.
Good morning, Joel.
Morning.
I think you're right on background checks, but what do you think's a reasonable length of time to wait?
It would be put in front of me if I was in a committee asking. I would say to the FBI or someone like that, I'd say, how long do you need? I mean, how long do you need? What and can you make it as quick as you possibly can? And if they said, well, I need 3 months, I'd say, no, that doesn't work. I mean, it would seem to me, Andrew, that if you give me your name, I can find out a lot about you in 2 seconds. And I don't like that, but the truth is I can. I mean, are you on Facebook, Andrew?
Yes. And
okay.
You're right. You can find out a lot about me because the last 3 or 4 guns I've bought, I've been deferred on the background check. I have not been able to walk out with that gun for a week. And I didn't realize this until I had tried getting my hazmat endorsement to my CDL. I had went down in September, did the fingerprinting, the photo, and everything to apply for the background check. I still don't have my hazmat endorsement because my background check isn't done.
And why is that, Andrew? What's the reason they give?
I called them because I was trying to get it done in February before the rules changed, so I didn't have to take the class. They said my name closely resembled, or not closely, it was the exact same as somebody else that has my exact same name that has an extensive criminal history.
Okay.
But I've provided my fingerprints. I've provided my photo. You have all my information. You should be able to distinguish between two people that have the same name because there are some common names out there.
You think? Yeah.
Who's the criminal and who's not.
So that being said, let me ask you this then. Who do you go to fix that? Who do you go to say, look, I'm being treated unfairly. This isn't who I am, but they're treating me like they am. I need this resolved. I need it resolved now. Who would you go to for that?
I should have called my congressmen and my senators, I think is where I should have went. I should have chased it up the chain because they give you a number to call, and you can call FBI, and then they can say, well, we coordinate with TSA on the hazmat thing. So then you call TSA, well, we're waiting on this and that. I mean, but I should have called now that you say that, I didn't think about it now. I should have maybe got, our delegation involved.
Yeah.
But I don't know how much power they have over it either.
Well, I think if a United States senator calls whoever's doing the investigating, in this particular case, I would assume it's the FBI, or you mentioned TSA, it would seem to me that they're going to pay attention if a United States senator calls. I mean, they certainly have in many cases.
If I was a senator, do I want to stick my neck out for some kid that can't pass a background check and something happens? Ooh, I'd come home to get him real quick.
Well, but I would, we just resolved whether or not we can find out a lot about you in a little time, right? So I'm not going to tell you yes. I'm not going to say, Andrew, you bet I'm on it. I'll get it for you by the end of the day. I'm going to look at my staff member who does all the work anyway, and I'm going to say, find out everything you can about Andrew. and see if we should be working for him. And then they're going to find out Andrew's not a bad guy. He's getting jerked around. Then you kick in. You do your job. That's why they're getting paid to work, Andrew. So my whole thing is this. If Joel Heitkamp, let's use him as an example. Joel Heitkamp goes in and tries to buy an AR. We'll make that to be the evil gun of the day, right? Goes in and tries to buy an AR because he wants to go out and do some prairie dog hunting this weekend. And so he goes in on Friday and says, I want to buy that gun right there. As much ammo as I can get my hands on. Is it wrong that Joel Heitkamp should have thought of that sooner and went in and purchased it sooner? Because they need to find out if on Joel Heitkamp's Facebook page, Twitter account, Instagram, whatever, he's talking about going and how we all need to rise up and kill as many black people as what we can in as short of period as what we can. I mean, it isn't wrong that Joel Heitkamp should have to wait, is it?
No, and I don't think it's all that wrong that I have to wait a week when I had the guns that I was deferred on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were approved. I was just fine with the week. And I'm like you. I own just as many guns, and I'm as conservative as can be. But the problem is I want them out of the hands of the people that are causing all the dang trouble and making us look bad.
I agree. And they put us at the biggest risk of us losing our guns are people that won't sit down and have a serious conversation about it. Someday we're not going to
locked in on that.
Right. Someday we're not going to have the votes to keep our guns. I mean, we're not. And if we're not willing to sit down and put some common sense gun laws in place, then we're going to lose them. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate the call. You know, the NRA is what, 4,000 or 4 million members? How hard do you think it would be in the world today with all of the mass shootings we've had to grab 5 million people and say, all right, everybody give me $50. We're going to go and join the NRA and we're going to overturn this whole thing. And I mean, it wouldn't take long, I would think. Now, would there be a new, different form of NRA the next day? Probably. My whole point is you've got to put people of common sense and of different cultures, different backgrounds in a room so that they understand the concerns of each other and then come out with a policy that works. And don't expect to wake up one morning and say, oh my God, it never worked. It never worked. Look what happened at Sandy Hook. Look what happened at Tops. Those are instances where something happened. Something happened. Let's do some figuring out of what happened. What just happened in Buffalo gives me the basic core knowledge that something should have been done. There was enough information out there to deal with it. He shouldn't have had guns. Period. He shouldn't have. And I don't think that I'm losing anything on my gun rights. I don't think I've weakened my gun ownership one bit by saying that gentleman shouldn't have had guns. And for those gun owners who believe that you're weakening your position, you're compromising, you're giving an opening to where they're going to take away our guns, then you have no level of common sense whatsoever. None. And I just want to know what you think about that. Another person texts in and says Goose River Brewing is a craft beer place.
Maybe.
I'm all in now. All right, let's go to the Weather Cave and find Too Tall Tom, who doesn't believe you should ever drink a beer that you can't see through, right? If you can see through it, you don't want it. Okay.
Heineken, a Beck's,
Stella.
or a Stella.
Yep.
Those are the exceptions.
We've had a
or
Stella
a Pilsner
together.
or Kel.
Right.
You know, those kinds of beers.
But unless you can walk on it, you don't want to drink it, is what you're saying.
Well, unless I can chew it and I have to floss my teeth afterwards, you know. Yeah, those are absolute requirements.
Exactly.
And but I don't do IPAs. I don't like the flavor of IPAs.
I'm with you on that as well.
We do agree on that.
Yep,
okay.
totally.
Well, get some chewable beer and I'll stop over sometime.
All right, it's a deal.
All right. Well, we got it.
I met him before he passed away. I met him. We were personal friends.
Well,
Just
that's
want
a
you to know.
stretch.
Might be a stretch, but I like telling people that. We met. I introduced him at a concert, just so you know. I said, ladies and gentlemen, Glenn Campbell will be coming up soon. Then his daughter goes, and Glenn Campbell. And I didn't get to do it. Anyway, 237-5948, 1-800-880-5346. Let's get to John. John, you're on News and Views.
Well, good morning.
Morning to you, John.
Say, I'm going to turn off my speaker.
Thank you for that, John. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Anyway, the point being of this whole thing with the guns is, where are the parents? Period.
Well, in many cases, John, parents encouraged it. Not necessarily the killing, but the use of when they knew their child wasn't a stable individual, because it was a method of parenting. Go to the range, go shoot, then you're not around me. Kind of a philosophy in many cases.
Well, that's the whole problem with our society today. Parents don't want to be parents. And the bottom line in the whole thing, where did that kid get all that money?
Well,
for all those weapons.
John, if you're going into summer, right? And you need 5 kids, 5 17-year-old kids to help do a job this summer. How hard of a time are you going to have to find those 5 17-year-old kids?
Actually, I'm the caretaker for Oakwood Cemetery in Lisbon, and I've had kids want to volunteer.
Yeah, but that's a whole different gig, John. I mean,
well, no, I've actually had some other people. I've actually had kids tell me, John, do you need someone for the summer?
Okay. You're the anomaly. You are. If you're running a landscape company and you're sitting there with a ton of work to do, you can't find kids that want a summer job. You can't. I mean, I'm sorry. You can't. The days of, hey, I'm fighting to be the one that got that job are over. They don't want the job, John.
Well, I know, but what I'm saying is, where did that kid get the money for all these guns?
Well, and the point I was trying to make, John, was the parents, because they sure aren't working for it.
Well, there again, my kids have had to work for everything they've got.
Welcome to my life, John. Welcome to my life. There was nothing harder than walking up to your dad on a Friday night and hoping he'd give you a 20 instead of a 10. And that was after you had worked all week, cutting wood, doing what he told you to do, making sure the school was clean, all of those things. Just hoping he'd give you a 20 instead of a 10. And it usually was a 10. I'll be back with your calls right after this. 5948 1-800-880-5346. You got to hang in there till he goes down.
The studio is weird today, as in you and me.
I know we're talking about serious things, and yet we're not behaving on the breaks in a serious way.
No, not at all.
That's because we have to go to the Red Hawks, cut a little promo.
Get to.
Boy, didn't you make me look bad in a hurry, right?
That's my job.
We get to.
I'm worried about what our promo looks like.
Yeah,
is gonna look like.
Don't worry, I'm gonna be the one doing it, so you won't look bad at all. 237-5948 1-800-880-5346. That's our Eye Consultants of North Dakota. Well, actually, 35270 is our Eye Consultants of North Dakota text club. Our studio line is sponsored by Laney's, and our studio is sponsored by Gunderson. So we thank them for that. Paul, you're on News and Views. Go ahead, Paul.
How's it going, Joel?
It's going well.
Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Outstanding. I'm out getting a little dirt under my fingernails.
Feels good, doesn't it? Doesn't it feel good?
Well, I can't complain about the money. It's right.
Yeah, exactly.
I got a little frustration, I guess, over some of your, well, it's a broad-held idea nowadays that people have about the Second Amendment. They think that the Second Amendment says that it's an unregulated militia, not a well-regulated militia. My concern is, what are they going to do if Samuel Alito was able to write in his opinion, don't know if it's going to be in there when the finished product comes out, but he mentions that this is not a long-held a long-held political or judicial something that they upheld in
standard,
for
right?
quite a while.
Yes.
The same issue is with the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment didn't become what it is today. Many gun owners know it today until it started in the 80s and then the 90s. The position on the Second Amendment, everybody can own a gun unregulated, is not long held. All you have to do is go back and look at what George Washington, that liberal founding father, what he wrote in 1774, something like that, the Whiskey Rebellion. Plain as day, he wrote about the militia and the purpose of the militia. They called on the state to provide armed bodies to put down the rebellion or the resistance about the whiskey tax, and he wrote that was the purpose that the militia was intended to do in the Second Amendment. Plain as day, written plain as day by our founding father, first president of the United States. People don't think that that's the case anymore, and it's a lack of history, a lack of knowledge, curiosity maybe. There's absolutely every right the government has to regulate not only guns, but who can own them, how many bullets they can carry, the length of the barrel. All that stuff is well within the government's right to regulate.
So the Second Amendment, and this isn't going to surprise you, you know it, and I think a lot of people do, but you're right. It says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And
exactly.
the purpose of that was to make sure that they didn't take your guns away in terms of the Brits, right? Because they were fearful that the Brits, and they had not allowed people to have guns, though, which is part of what the argument is, right?
The militia was our modern-day National Guard.
Right.
Your private citizen that when they were called up to duty, grabbed their gun and went to do the government's security.
Mm-hmm. But here's the other part. People can interpret that language. For example, you and I both know, because you're a student of history, what the standing of the Posse Comitatus is, right?
Yes.
And they see themselves as that militia regulated by their leaders. Agreed?
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. So it's all about the definition. It's all about what you deem some of those words to be. So if I'm in Buffalo, North Dakota, and I'm sitting there, I'm regulating and defining who I want in my group to go do this mass murder, is my point. I mean, it's a lot. Sometimes it's like the Bible. People abuse what's said for what they want it to say.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree with you there. The issue I have is who forms and recognizes the militia in the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
It should be the government.
So
I mean,
let me ask you this, Paul. Forget our form of government. Forget about what we deem democracy to be. Do this for me. Solve the problem. You are king now of the United States of America. You're king. Whatever you say goes. What would you do about all of these mass murders?
The first thing I would do is I would do what most Americans, the vast majority of Americans, but the Republican Party is unwilling to do, is to regulate the firearm. I'm a Marine, okay? I know what an assault weapon is. I'm trained on them. I know how to effectively employ them for maximum production. I know what an assault weapon is. You cannot justify why the general public needs assault weapons. It's about putting as many bullets out there as you possibly can in the shortest amount of time. Okay? Let's codify what an assault weapon is. Not just a semi-automatic, your shotgun falls into that. Blah,
Not just
blah,
a
blah.
synthetic stock. Okay, I get it.
No, I'm talking about the purpose of, if you can put 60 to 120 rounds downrange in 1 minute, you are talking about flying lead intended for one purpose, keeping their heads down and affecting casualties. Okay? So the rapid rate of fire is an issue. Magazine capacity is an issue. Background checks, obviously, is something that people are just going to have to swallow. If you want to lose the whole thing, fine, then fight it. But you got to get reasonable about background checks. You're right. There's no reason that a guy can go in and buy a gun and not wait, a week.
I couldn't agree more. I
got so many guns I couldn't possibly shoot them all, at least not in a week's time, and I really don't need any more. And if I want one, I have no problem waiting for it.
You just described my life, Paul. You did. Thank you, and thanks for bringing into the conversation something you think I was avoiding or didn't say properly. Let's get to Jim. Jim, you're on News and Views.
You know what I get the biggest kick out of is all these what we used to call in the Army barracks lawyers, barracks judges, that they all think they know better than the Supreme Court of the United States. Well, the Supreme Court of the United States said we have the right to keep and bear arms. And when I hear people like this last guy sitting there telling me that I should not have any reason to own what he calls an assault weapon, which is basically a weapon designed, in my opinion, as an infantryman, sir, is to be beaten up, dragged around, beat the hell out of, and still function in a combat environment and keep people's heads down. Okay, and if you have any question, anybody has any question as why we shouldn't have those kind of weapons, go look at Ukraine. That's a big reminder, everybody, why we need to have the right to keep ourselves safe from enemies, foreign and domestic.
So, Jim, should you be able to walk into any gun store and leave that day with a gun?
I think you should have background checks. I have no problem with that. I see tons of mental illness out there. I don't think you should have that. And I think they should be actually stricter. Actually, absolutely stricter. But
I
think if you qualify for that weapon, you should be allowed to own it.
Jim, we're not disagreeing on anything. Absolutely anything. If that background check took 5 days, would you be okay with it?
I'd be fine with it. And when I hear people say, well, you had to have limits on magazines and all this other stuff, it's like, no. limits on the First Amendment, do we? We don't have limits on the Fifth Amendment, do we? Or any,
We do
But all
have
of a sudden
we do
think
have
we can have.
Jim. We do
Go
have
ahead.
limits on how many shells we can have in our gun for pheasants, right?
Yeah, which I think is a dumb rule too. But whatever.
Yeah. My
That's some people's idea of ethics, I guess.
my point is this: so the only time I really use a big magazine clip is if I'm prairie dog hunting or something like that. The only time I have guns where if I brought them out of my safe, somebody would say that's an assault weapon. It's a semi-automatic weapon with a thick barrel, because if I'm doing something like that, I'm going to send a lot through it and it's going to get hot. So I think people don't realize what an assault weapon is. What he just talked about. Let me give you an example. You're in Las Vegas, you're in a floor of the hotel, and you want to kill a bunch of people at a concert, and you put a bump stock on a semi-automatic weapon. Should that bump stock be illegal?
You know what? I don't think they should be sold. Should it be illegal? Yeah, it probably should be, because it turns the semi-automatic weapon into an automatic weapon.
So, but
people can make the damn thing.
You went, Jim, to a place where government is now regulating.
Yeah, but they're not regulating the weapon itself. They're regulating an attachment to the weapon.
But that then you could make that same argument about a scope, right? That's an attachment to the weapon.
You're starting to really.
But, no, I know, Jim. I am clouding the water. I am throwing. I get it. I understand why this would frustrate you. It would frustrate me. But that's the point. The one thing we all can agree on is the fact that the person that gets sold that weapon should have a background check. And then we agree on it. So why the hell can't we have it?
I've never had an argument with that.
Right. Why can't we have it?
I don't know anybody who's against it. I have no idea. There's nobody who is against background checks, Joel.
Jim, the reason we don't have them is because the far right is against them.
Well, we do have them, Joel.
No, we don't. Jim, you can walk in and leave with a 22 tomorrow.
You have to have a background check.
Jim, the point is, Jim, you could walk in and leave with a 22 tomorrow. Agreed?
You have to pass the background check. What was the last time you bought a weapon, Joel?
The last time I bought a weapon was about 6 months ago. My point is,
did you not have to fill out a form
and did that background check?
And then they had to clear it through the local sheriff's office. Did they not?
Did that background check involve anything in regards to what I've put out there, that there was a manifesto in regards to going around killing people? No. When I left with that weapon 6 months ago, all I did was fill out a form, a sheet of paper, and I will guarantee you the background check was not extensive. It was simply to the point where, okay, yep, he isn't on some list. And that is not right. We give people more information than that. Personally, we do. Why not look at it? Let's get to the weather cave and visit with Too Tall Tom Szymanski, and he'll give you your forecast.
All right, we got some shower activity pushing through.
groupie now, right? You're loving the honor flight.
I am a groupie.
Exactly. They do such a great job, and I know they got a big event, so let's get to it. Let's get to our buddy Jeff, who's on the board. How you been, Jeff?
I'm doing well.
I understand there's going to be a party tonight, or at least I can win prime rib. Talk to me about this.
There's a chance. $10 a ticket. We have our annual, or every other week we do a meat raffle at a Wild Rice Bar and Grill. Starts about 5:30, goes till about 7-ish. The guys from Butcher Block gave me a prime rib, custom cabinets, paid the balance, so it's all profit for the honor flight. $10 a ticket, about 7 o'clock tonight, we're giving it away. You do have to be at the meat raffles to buy tickets for it. That's the only place we're selling them.
Yeah, and if you don't know where the Wild Rice Bar and Grill is, go south of Fargo, and you're going to come to the Wild Rice exit. You know, basically, we're talking about Horace, right? Jeff, get off, take a left, and go.
Pretty much.
Yep.
Then the rest of the meat raffles, they're $1 a ticket. It only takes $1 to win. You can buy as many as you like. We have T-bones. We got big slabs of bacon. We got jerky and beef steaks.
Now,
just a good time.
And it is. I've been there. It's fun. I'm going to pop in tonight. I'm going to make sure and stop in. I can't stay for the whole length of the doggone thing, but I'm going to be there. And this honor flight, ladies and gentlemen, in this broad area that's listening to us, there has been a lot of folks from Western North Dakota, and I know you won't be able to make it tonight, but that honor flight has been for you as well. I mean, Jeff, how many times have you seen somebody from Williston or Crosby or Tioga on that honor flight?
Well, I've gone 9. I think I've seen 9 of them.
Yeah. All right, buddy. We'll see you tonight.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for what you do. Abby, did you like the honor flight?
Oh, I loved the honor
Did you meet a guy that wore a bandana on the honor flight?
He wore a Nike headband. It was Canute. I met so many friends on the honor flight.
Yeah,
I missed them all.
And it was fun. It really was. And it doesn't change each one. There's always great guys and gals on it. All right. Good riding with you folks. We'll see you back. Well, we're going to Goose River Brewing tomorrow.
Coffee with Cape Geo.
Come to Hillsboro.